So I know what you're thinking. Oh my god, the year just started, now there's a Mercury retrograde. What am I going to do? But I'm here to explain what this particular Mercury retrograde will entail as a collective transit and how it will play out for each individual sign. So make sure you watch this entire video until the end so you really understand the energetic ins and outs of this particular time, and then see how it will particularly manifest based on your rising sign. Hi, I'm Erin, a professional astrologer, author, and philosophy and psychology student who blends traditional Hellenistic astrology with modern counseling dynamics to approach spirituality in a grounded way. If you are excited to hear all about this, make sure that you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you never miss what the stars have in store for you and are always up to date with the cosmic guidance. Also, this video is brought to you by Rashi, my newly launched platform and website connecting spiritual practitioners with their ideal clients. So if you are a part of the spiritual community, if you are offering services, you can post them, or if you are looking to receive spiritual services, you can find them. Things like astrology, Reiki, acupuncture, holistic health, yoga, tarot, anything along those lines that you would consider a metaphysical or esoteric service. You can post those on Rashi and get your energetic needs met or hold space to provide that healing for someone else. So all the info is down below. So as an overview, what is a retrograde? A retrograde is when a planet's motion appears to move backwards from our vantage point here on Earth. Keyword, appears. No planet can actually move backwards, but the way that Earth's orbit currently is coinciding with Mercury's orbit means that it looks like it's moving backwards from where we are here on Earth. This leads to an inversion of the normal Mercury significations. So what does this mean for a Mercury retrograde? Well, Mercury signifies communication, intellect, technology, travel, speaking, etc. These topics can be delayed, reversed, or have trouble manifesting during this time. It's neither good nor bad. It simply is a better time for revising or editing than starting anew or signing contracts. It's why astrologers will often discourage beginning some new plan during this time, though things like revising or copy editing a pre-existing work could be really well suited. Mercury retrogrades generally happen 3 times a year, resulting in 3 months out of the year having Mercury retrograde. So to say the least, they aren't in and of themselves that big of a deal. On the hierarchy of astrological symbols to be wary of, a Mercury retrograde is nowhere near the top of it. However, in this information age of progress-obsessed moving forward, the little snafus that Mercury retrograde can coincide with have led to its demonization and infamy in pop culture. Notice that I said coincides with snafus and not causes snafus. Mercury retrograde is not something to fear, blame, or deem as causing your misfortunes. Mercury retrograde is something to view as a signal for these energies showing up in our lives. Like a clock on the wall, it isn't making it 3 o'clock, it is signaling that it's 3 o'clock. So stop saying fuck you Mercury retrograde, it doesn't make any categorical sense. So basically Mercury will appear to stop in a degree of a certain sign, move backwards into an earlier degree of the zodiac, and then station direct to move forward business as usual. And a final preliminary note, my favorite, most important thing ever about Mercury retrogrades: Mercury cannot be in retrograde, just like it can't be in backwards. Mercury is either retrograde or is not retrograde. Case closed. Good to go. So a breakdown of this particular Mercury retrograde finally. It will enter shadow on February 2nd at 28 degrees of Aquarius. By shadow, I mean that even though Mercury is not retrograde on February 2nd, it will enter the point at which it will at some point retrograde back into. So Mercury is going retrograde, and on February 2nd, it's going to be where it will retrograde back into. So Mercury is basically entering where it will then later retrograde back into. It just kind of starts the slow movement. This Mercury retrograde will begin on February 16th here on the East Coast at 12 degrees of Pisces, give or take a day depending on where you are in the world. Mercury is already in its exile and its fall in Pisces, meaning that its innate planetary significations are both foreign to the sign of Pisces and literally depressed or withheld, functionally by being in a Jupiter-ruled sign. Let me know if you'd like a full video on exaltations and falls through the exaltation scheme. It's a really fascinating concept that deals more with astronomy and rationale, rather than affinity. It's not loosey-goosey, it's like clear-cut, algorithmic. Mercury will station direct and the retrograde will end on March 9th at 28 degrees of Aquarius, and it will finally clear its shadow period range on March 29th at 12 degrees of Pisces. So, as for what to expect, the themes emphasized by this Mercury retrograde will begin to show up around February 2nd, though these are hints and not outright Mercury retrograde significations. So Mercury stations retrograde, meaning that it basically goes still and stops moving forward on February 16th at 12 degrees of Pisces. And this will be in the second decan of Pisces. There are 3 decans for each sign, all ruled by a planet, though this rulership is very nuanced and not nearly as important as the overall ruler of a sign. So this is very detailed astrology I'm getting into. This is not basic astrology. But this decan of Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, which is the, again, antithesis to Mercury, and Jupiter wants the big picture ideas while Mercury wants the fine-tuned details. So Pisces is a Jupiter-ruled sign itself, so this is further emphasizing the fact that the hallmarking issues of this retrograde will be around losing vital details for the sake of a blurred, large-scale point of view. Jupiter, the ruler of this Mercury retrograde, because Jupiter rules Pisces, and this Mercury retrograde will be beginning in Pisces, and for most of it be in Pisces basically, is Jupiter in its fall in Capricorn. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer and fallen or sunken in Capricorn. Jupiterian optimism and desire for expansion has trouble actualizing in the pragmatic, exclusive lens of Capricorn. A full video on this transit of Jupiter through Capricorn is linked below if you want to watch it. We may have this tendency to attach to an idea of how hard we need to work or how long we have to go, and therefore miss out on the intricacies of the job that we have to do here and now. So there are some other energies planetarily with transits going on alongside this Mercury retrograde. So Venus will be in Aries through most of this, and Venus is in its detriment in Aries. Venus rules Libra, the opposite sign, so here it has to come through a Martian lens when Venus is the antithesis to Mars. So there's a difficulty in actualizing the harmonious significations of Venus through a lens that is focused on severing, getting, or forcing. There might be a tendency to force others to be attracted to us or place too much importance on what we desire to manifest. Though Venus does enter Taurus at the beginning of March, which means it's coming into its own sign where it's comfortably getting to live in its own house, and it will be immediately conjoining Uranus, so there's a jolt of sudden dynamics around money, relationships, or female figures nearing the end of this Mercury retrograde. Mars will enter Capricorn as soon as this Mercury retrograde begins, and Mars is exalted in Capricorn, which means that we are understanding that the precise effort that we put in will be the output that we put back. It encourages diligent, smart working rather than laziness or stupid overworking, and the fact that this Mars is entering Capricorn at the exact start of this retrograde is kind of like how it's indicating that the shadow might have had us grimly anxious about what's to come, but now we see that we are up for the challenge of revisiting the past that this Mercury retrograde is asking us to revisit. This is a pretty strong and helpful placement to have, as it provides a superior sextile to Mercury, so it's signaling that we are offered the opportunity to make use of the diligence that this Mercury retrograde could encourage, because sextiles are aspects of opportunity. We probably aren't in a place to fine-tune all of the details or like intricately revise the grammar of a novel we've written, but it is a good time to reanalyze goals you've written for the year, reconsider your mindset, and open up to receiving messages from spirit guides or ascended masters who have your best interest. Key here is have your best interest, because this is a very thinly veiled Mercury retrograde, so just be aware of energies, be aware of putting up boundaries to what you don't want in your headspace. During this Mercury retrograde on February 23rd, there will be a new moon in Pisces conjunct this Mercury retrograde. There is a full video on this linked below that you can check out after this, but there will be a new beginning coming out of the dynamics that are showing up for you here. It's definitely not a linear new beginning that I would recommend signing a contract on or making a business plan for. It's instead a great time to tune into the new messages that arise from within or around downloaded messages from source energy of this time. And it's imperative to tune into the fact that new moons are times of going within, because this one is definitely a time of like alone time and going within. So you can watch down below for the full story on how this will show up and manifest for your sign, in and out, the details and all that. On February 18th, the sun will then enter Pisces, and on the 25th, there's a Sun-Mercury cazimi in Pisces. So a cazimi is a conjunction, and something will come to light regarding the misinformation, delays, or reversals of this Mercury retrograde around the 25th. It isn't an information of resolution, but more so a missing piece around where we're unclear, or a realization that we were misled. So it's more like a signpost to redirect rather than a signpost that we've reached the end destination around the confusion. On March 9th, there is a Virgo full moon ruled by this Mercury retrograde, yet again another lunation surrounding the themes of how this is showing up. It's a culmination where things are coming to light around these matters as they pertain to the Virgo area of your life, opposite to the particular area of life of this Mercury retrograde. There's a full video linked down below, though it won't be public until later in the month, so if you're viewing this right away, wait a little bit, but you know, it's linked down below for you to watch in due time. Probably letting go of the obsession for a certain thing to work out in a certain way, and releasing some control over this Mercury retrograde. By this time for the Virgo full moon, Mercury will already be back in Aquarius, making no major aspects. So this could be an eruption of confusion or a purging of controlling tendencies moving forward. The day that Mercury stations direct on the 12th, Venus will still be conjunct Uranus. So likely the Mercury retrograde will end with a sudden liberation or erupting moment in relationships once the communication does become a bit clearer. And stationing direct does not mean that things will suddenly clear up. Mercury is moving so slowly when it stations, it's literally like stopping to turn around, that it's more of a time for the reversals to begin moving forward little by little. The shadow period will not clear until the 29th, so we're drudging along slowly and steadily, picking up efficiency and clarity. Though Mercury will not leave Pisces, the muddy sign of its exile and its fall, until April 11th, so our minds and mental faculties probably won't be at normal functioning or peak articulation until April, when Mercury is finally in Aries, out of any like Piscean swampiness. So some tips for this Mercury retrograde. Overall tip big from me is to avoid signing contracts, making super important life or death plans, or taking important trips during this time, just because there is such the potential for misinformation. And I'm not saying this because it would be bad to do so, but likely just because there will probably be so much delay or frustration if we do try to actualize something definitively. This Mercury retrograde isn't particularly difficult to me in terms of its conversation with other things going on in the sky. Like, I'm not alarmed, but Mercury itself is super bogged down and not functioning well in Pisces. So just remain flexible. Like, be open to changes of plans, prepare for miscommunications, and have a sense of humor around the mix-ups and delays. If you can go inward during this time to reconnect with intuition instead of clinging on to micromanaging, it could be a really useful transit for each of us. One of my favorite spiritual teachers, Phil Good, he teaches on being a dot, which is about letting go of pre-planning and that control clutch. Being a dot is about tuning into intuition and making decisions based on being here in the moment. He's a Virgo himself, and it's been a milestone concept for my Virgo tendency to micromanage. I'm gonna link that video down below on being a dot, so I highly recommend that you check that out if you feel called for a spiritual lesson to think of during this time. So let's get into what areas of life this will specifically be showing up in based on your rising sign. Transits pass through the houses, which represent areas of life, and these depend on your rising sign because the rising sign or the ascendant sets up the entire chart. Astro.com is linked down below if you don't know your entire natal chart, as knowing your rising sign is the accurate way to read natal forecast horoscopes. Mercury retrogrades will also show up more prominently for those with Mercury-ruled placements like Sun, Moon, or Rising in Gemini or Virgo, or also those who have Mercury activated as a Time Lord right now, in more advanced techniques like annual perfections or zodiacal releasing. We'll run through all of the rising signs now and what the transit will be happening. As for... I've been talking for so long. We're gonna run through the rising signs. Alright, so if you are an Aries, this will be retrograding between your Pisces 12th house regarding self-undoing, self-destructive habits, exile, addictions, and or demons, and your 11th house of groups, friends, and alliances. So do watch out with communications, reversals, or delays around those things. For Taurus risings, this will be between your 11th house of groups, friends, networking, and alliances, and your 10th house of career and public image. So watch out around delays, Merc retro shit, around those lines. For Gemini risings, this will be between your 10th house of career and public image and your 9th house of foreign travel, higher education, and authority figures, so watch out around those things. For Cancer risings, this will be between your 9th house of foreign travel, higher education, long distance goals, authority, philosophy or religions, and your 8th house of shared finances, deep assets, shared bonds, so there could be snafus or delays regarding those things. For Leo risings, this will be between your 8th house of shared finances, joint assets, and deep bonds, and your 7th house of relationships and partnerships, so be wary around those topics. For Virgo risings, this will be in your 7th house of relationships and one-to-one partnerships, and your 6th house of health, illness, and coworkers, so be wary around both of those areas. For Libra risings, this will be in your 6th house of health, illness, coworkers, daily routine, and your 5th house of children, sex, creativity, or art, so there could be misunderstandings or miscommunications, delays around those things. For Scorpio risings, this will be in your 5th house of children, sex, and creativity, and your 4th house of home, family, and property. So both of those areas of your life could be targeted for reversals or delays. For Sagittarius risings, this will be in your 4th house of home, family, or property, and your 3rd house of communication, short-term travel, or siblings, so either of those things could be highlighted for trouble. Capricorn risings will have this happening between the 3rd house of communication, short-term travel, and siblings, and the 2nd house of finances, possessions, and values. So both of those things could be up for reversals, miscommunications, or delays. For Aquarius risings, this will be between your 2nd house of finances and possessions and 1st house of self and physical body, so watch out for miscommunications around either of those things. For Pisces risings, this will be in your 1st house of self, physical body, and identity, and your 12th house of self-undoing, self-destructive habits, exiled, meditation, psychology, internal states. So there could be reversals or delays around either of those things. So overall, let me know how you are feeling around this Mercury retrograde, how you are expecting it to show up for you, how this is resonating with any energies that are already taking place for you. I would love to hear from you in a comment down below. Otherwise, like, subscribe, do all of the things, hit post notes, check out my readings down below if you would like a reading for me, from me, not for me. Check out Rashi down below as well. Sending much love, and I will see you in the next video.